All right, so hello everyone. Welcome to the Beyond Barnard School to Work Transition Series, which is part of the Summer Colloquium 2020. We have a ton of events. I see a lot of familiar names, so I see some of you have been coming to these. If this is your first one, welcome. If it's not, welcome back. I'm Lindsay Granger Weaver, and I am one of the Associate Directors on the Advising and Programs team at Beyond Barnard. And I do advising and programs and a bunch of panels with a lot of great alums like this one today. The School to Work Transition Series is really to aid recent alums in their transition from Barnard to work and what that means both in your head and what that means, on the ground. This workshop will be in the next few Mondays. And so next week we'll be starting work remotely. So if you haven't started work yet, or you started working remotely and you're like, I have no idea how to navigate this situation, definitely come back next week. The next one will be professional etiquette and unwritten rules of the workplace. So figuring out company culture, figuring out what it means to work in a specific place. How many exclamation points should you put in an email? Things like that. It should be a good one. It should be a fun one. And then after that, the final one will be workplace rights and self-advocacy. So how to make sure that you are protecting yourself, how to make sure that you're taking advantage of the resources available to you, and how to stick up for yourself, especially in a weird virtual environment where you may not feel as comfortable sticking your neck out. So sign up for all of those in Handshake, any of the ones that you're interested in, or all of them, they'll be great. This session is the kickoff to the series, and we've got some awesome alums who have all been on panels before, and I'm thankful that they wanted to come back and do another one. It's about defining professional success. So really just to kickstart the process of developing yourself into the type of professional that you want to be. We're going to start with some questions, and that, they'll all answer. And then it'll be up to you guys. So if you have questions at that point, you can either unmute yourself and just shout them out, or you can put them in the chat either to everyone or privately to me, whatever makes you feel comfortable. We just really want you to get your questions answered. All right, so we're gonna start with this. And if any of the panelists, I'm just gonna cold call you based on where you're sitting on my screen. And just really briefly introduce yourself, who you are, what you're doing now, and also just a little bit about how you're managing the world right now with everything that's going on. So I'll start with Jess.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jess Green. I graduated from Barnard in December of 2015. So I'm technically a 2016 grad, but I like to say 2015. And I studied psychology and economics. And then following my graduation from Barnard, I took a few months off, and then I started as a human capital management analyst at Goldman Sachs, where I was doing internal talent management and diversity and inclusion work. Did that for about 2 years. And then I transitioned over to Bridgewater Associates, which is a small hedge fund in Connecticut, where I'm a campus recruiter. And I've been in that role for about 2.5 years now. I've recruited software engineers, investment researchers. I spent about 7 months recruiting MBAs for our management program, and I'm currently recruiting undergrads on the West Coast for our investment research internship, and I also oversee all of our diversity recruiting efforts at the campus level. So that's what I do. And how have I been dealing with the world? Yeah, it's been a tough time. I think it's one of the probably hardest periods where, I've really, like, the idea of bringing yourself to work has kind of come top of mind for me lately, just because it's in a world where there are usually like boundaries and advice that people will give you of how much to share and how not. I think, like, with what's going on in the world right now, I've erred a lot more on the side of just being honest about how I'm feeling and what I need, because I think it's one of those situations, both with the pandemic and what's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of that. It's one of those things that I just can't ignore and put to the side. And so I think that I've just been very patient and kind to myself lately, more so than I historically have been, which has also been a good lesson of like, I should always be doing that. But I don't know, I would say with patience, with reflection, with being kind to myself, those are all probably the things that how I've been dealing with it. But I think the term dealing with it is tough because I don't think I've been doing a very good job. But yeah, I think just being patient and kind to yourself and speaking up about what you need and being vocal about that, and just keeping perspective have all been the things that have sort of helped me get through the days. And I've started doing, this is a very long introduction, but I've started doing, like I wake up in the morning and I write down 3 things I'm grateful for, which is always helpful to put things into perspective so I can get through the day. And it's been, at first I was like, all right, that's kind of corny, but it's actually really been helping because I start my day off thinking about the things that are good rather than waking up and thinking about the things that are bad. So that's me. So I'll put myself on mute now, but excited to talk to you all.
Thanks, Jess. It's not corny at all because I do the same thing. So next we'll go to Giselle.
Hey everyone, Jess, I loved your introduction. I was like smiling and like, yes, I do some of those things in terms of really coping and having things that make you happy during a time where you really have to, I think, cultivate and create time to have joy. So I guess my intro, I am Ecuadorian. I grew up in Chicago. I am class of 2017 at Barnard, studied art history. And I had, like when I was at Barnard, my mom and dad, they were like, how could you study art history? Like, will you ever get a job with that? And it was one of those things where I knew that for my parents as immigrants, it was so important for them to see me become like perhaps a doctor or study economics, but like I couldn't get A's in econ. So I changed my major because I did it at first to make them happy. And then I realized I had to think about my interests and really make the most of the privilege that I had in terms of getting an American education and doing a liberal arts college and all of that. So my parents let me study art history with like the one rule that I would have to have a job before graduation. So it's like, oh, easy. Like that's my goal anyway. So we're aligned. So during Barnard, I interned at Harper's Bazaar and Elle. Both were unpaid internships. But I got really lucky. I received a grant from Barnard to subsidize my housing. And then when I graduated, I ended up joining the Estee Lauder companies. So within my current role at Lauder, I manage the retailer e-commerce business for La Mer. So La Mer is a luxury skincare brand that is sold across 14 different sites, including Saks, Bloomingdale's, Nordstrom, and Sephora. So my day-to-day is really managing all 14 accounts, the relationships with the buyers, making sure that we are telling a story for La Mer across the websites, the emails, social. And I think, you know, when I think about current day society, I think one of the issues in the beauty space is that we are not an inclusive space. So something that I love about my job is that I get to work with creative and say, you know, these are the models that I want to see, like, and really influence that creative discussion and conversation so that we can make sure that we're hiring models that don't look like the quintessential Caucasian model that we've always used. So I think that one thing I've learned during the pandemic is that I have to find the little ways to make impact. So in addition to like myself posting on social or myself donating, I also want to be in the rooms at work and be able to influence who gets our dollars in terms of who we're continuing to hire. So yeah, that's my introduction.
Oh, that's great. Thanks. Thanks for sharing all that. And now finally, last but certainly not least, Miss Selena.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for sharing your stories, Giselle and Jess. I really appreciate them. And thank you for hosting this conversation, everybody on the call, Lindsay, Christine, and all the organizers. So my name is Selena Kaban Gandhi. I'm New Yorican, born in the Bronx, and grew up my whole life in New York, but my whole family's from Puerto Rico. And I graduated from Barnard in the class of 2008. So I find myself beginning to become one of the more senior people on panels like this. It's very interesting. But yeah, so it's been some time since I was at Barnard. I was an economic history major, kind of like Giselle described. My parents, my mom's a medical professional. She's a nurse practitioner, and my father's an attorney. He was a criminal defense attorney. Now he's a judge, administrative law judge. But I was trying to figure out my path. And so the easiest no-brainer was medicine. So I walked into Barnard being pre-med, and after a few classes, chemistry, for example, and calculus 3, I realized, well, this isn't so much fun, and my grades aren't doing me any favors. They were okay, but just not the strong GPA A's and high B's that I was used to from high school. So I just started following things that I thought were interesting, and that led me to take some really interesting classes with Professor Jose Moya on the immigration patterns in Latin America. He's an expert on migration, human migration. And so I very quickly fell in love with history. Never liked history in high school, but really enjoyed it at Barnard. And then economics. I thought efficiency was a really cool idea. And so lo and behold, the joint major of economic history. And it was really cool. It was really fun. I thought I was headed towards business school. But then the economy crashed right upon graduation in the fall of 2008. And I quickly had to decide whether business and the world of finance was the right path for me, and also whether for me it was something that would be sustainable for the long term. So my dad, he took advantage of that moment and said, why don't you go to law school? And so I said, okay, well, let's see how that will go. Let me try being a paralegal first. So did paralegal work for a year, really enjoyed it. And then 2 years later, I found myself at CUNY School of Law, Public Interest Law School, and I became a lawyer. And I loved CUNY Law School. If anybody on this call is interested in law school, let me know. I never grew up saying I wanted to be a lawyer, but I really love the work that I do now. And so I believe the law is something that people who have different interests can use, because there's so many different areas of the law. You can use that as a tool for good in many different areas, whether it's environmental rights or health rights, or the work that I do, which is family law, specifically working with survivors of domestic violence to get divorces and orders of protection from former abusers. So it's the sort of law that's different from maybe the corporate law that you would see on TV, or the criminal defense litigation that you see on TV. It's family law. And I did many different types of law. I clerked with 2 judges. I clerked in criminal law, state court in New Jersey. I did a volunteer clerkship with Judge Denny Chin in the Second Circuit. He's my mentor. And I also worked for the NYPD for a little bit less than a year as a law clerk, essentially, in their trials division. And now I'm at Manhattan Legal Services. I'm a family law attorney. That is my full-time job. My labor of love, as I like to call it, which is, it takes up a lot of my time. It is basically a part-time job, but it's volunteer, is running the high school division of the Sonia and Selena Sotomayor Judicial Internship program. So when I was a law student, I started this program. I was in my 12 year of law school, and I wrote about starting out an internship program for high school students from underrepresented and under-resourced communities, just like the Bronx where I grew up. And I thought, how cool would it be to have students go intern with judges, to be able to see what a judge does, what happens in the chambers. I have an attorney for a father, so I could have learned about it, but I still didn't. And I thought, after I interned with judges in law school, it'd be a really wonderful thing for high school students to learn about early on before they drop out of high school. And so launched the program my 3rd year of law school. I was still a student. And after I launched it, I wrote to Justice Sotomayor and I asked to name the program after her and her mother. It was kind of shot in the dark, and by some miracle, she said yes. And she loved the idea. And not only did she love the idea of having the program named after her and her mother, who also happens to share my name, Selena, she wanted to meet our students every year from then on. And so this is a really special opportunity that I feel very lucky to be able to give to high school students who come from underprivileged communities in all 5 boroughs of New York. And through it brings me a lot of fulfillment to know that I'm giving back. And being on this panel is another way to give back, to be able to inspire other people to pursue the law. Oh, thank you for the clap, Lindsay. To pursue the law, or to just know that Barnard's an amazing education, and it doesn't really matter what career path you want to take. It's it's going to set a foundation for whatever path you want to take. And you can all do it. It doesn't mean you have to know that you're going to become a doctor or a lawyer or an astrophysicist. You can make that decision along the way, even after you graduate, because you have the tools that Barnard provides to be able to succeed in whatever graduate school or professional career you take after Barnard. So that's my introduction. I know that there was one question, how am I managing the world now? I'll just briefly say a list of things. Going for walks in Prospect Park, very close to where I live. I live in Park Slope / Gowanus. So Prospect Park is just a 10-minute walk away. So I go for walks. I do bird watching now. I'm not a bird watcher, but I love bird watching now. I do that with my husband. We go on mini hikes. I like to bake. Some of our hits include homemade pastry dough and banana bread, and also most recently muffins. So that's all been really fun, and doing Zoom hangouts with friends. So that's a really great way. Just a suggestion to everybody, if you don't use Zoom or Google Hangout, those are great ways to connect to friends or each other, your Barnard classmates, even if you're in different states. And I do Zoom hangouts regularly with my law school buddies, my college buddies who are living California, DC, Connecticut, all over the United States. So that's what I do for fun.
Great. And for the record, you had quite a few claps. So it wasn't just me.
I saw it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
And so I guess we'll get started with all those questions. Thank you guys so much for sharing everything that you shared and all of these tips. Definitely going to start to do more of them as I navigate this world now. But to the task at hand, what is your personal definition of professional success? And can you talk a little bit about how you came to it? And we'll, I guess, go in a loop, or whoever wants to start can start. But if not, I'll shout it back to Jess.
Yeah. I think the definition changes all the time, for me at least. I think, but more broadly, I think that when I think about like what success in school means and then what success in a career means, I think when I thought about success in school, it was very much like things that I could read on a paper that defined success. So it's like getting good grades, like doing well on a test. I mean, being happy has always been a part of being successful for me. But I think when I left school, I went into my first job and I was very much looking for someone to just like give me a piece of paper or a job spec or something that was like, this is how to be successful. And that didn't happen because that's not how the world works, unfortunately, or fortunately, actually. So I think for me, there was a journey of defining it for myself. And I actually think the journey probably took me the first 2 years of my career to figure out, and I'm still figuring it out. But I do think that my move from Goldman to Bridgewater was a function of me really learning about who I was and what I wanted and what was important to me. And then I kind of woke up one day and was like, okay, like this is what I want, and what I'm doing right now or where I am right now is not aligning to that thing. So let me find a place and a job where like I can be pushing toward that definition of success. And so I think that I came to it through a lot of self-reflection, a lot of trial and error, a lot of stepping back and looking at the bigger picture rather than looking at things in like very finite periods of time or in like quick like based on like tasks or projects, and seeing it as more broad than that. So for me, I think my personal definition of professional success is being in a role or in a place that really values like making change and questioning the status quo and really pushing against what has been done in the past, and really pushing you to reflect deeply about yourself, not just like within a role, but like, what am I good at? What do I like to do? And then finding a role that fits that. And that's kind of why I went to Bridgewater, because something that's kind of unique about their interview process is that a lot of the professional hiring, you come in through this general pipeline where you come in and you don't actually know what role you're interviewing for. And that's not the intention of the interview. The interview is to get to know you, what you're good at, what you're not good at, what kind of person you're like, et cetera. And then they take that information and they look at the open roles they have and they match you to it. And so I think that that's a pretty unique way of interviewing. But for me, I went in and I was like, okay, these people are really getting to know me. And then I'm going to trust the process that they'll help me find a role that matches well. So for me, professional success is being in a role where, at least for me, I'm evolving things, I'm changing things, I'm improving the world, I'm giving back in some way. And again, that can mean different things to different people. But for me, working with college students and helping them understand what the first step of their career is going to be, even if it doesn't mean Bridgewater. And that's like a big thing at Bridgewater, is like, your job is not to convince people to come to Bridgewater. Your job is to help people make the best decision for them. And if that doesn't mean Bridgewater, that's okay. And so that's kind of how I think about professional success, and it evolves, right? Like, I think I'm transitioning in a time in my life where I think about the world as less of like, what job do I want? And now I'm transitioning to like, what career do I want? And so, and again, it's a weird time to be thinking about that, just because the job market looks like what it does, but it's still a journey that I want to go on. So that's kind of, that's my answer.
Great, thanks. Do either Selena or Giselle, do you want to chime in? Whoever wants to unmute.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that answer, Jess. I was taking notes because I'm like learning about myself as I hear your stories. But I definitely think for me too, it's constantly evolving and also constantly learning. I think that what I loved about Barnard was that I was always like reading books and annotating. And I think that sometimes in the corporate world, it really is just like send that email, do that thing, and it's very fast paced. And I think a measure of success for me is to be able to sit down, and it's not like I do it every week, but maybe at least once a month, just sit down and say, what did I do different? What did I change? What did I learn about this like paid media campaign? One thing that like I learned in the role, the person who had it before me was very executional. So I really wanted to evolve the role so that I could speak up in meetings more and look up data more and say, hey guys, this product is selling, 5 times faster than other products. And that happened in the past 3 months. Let's have a bigger moment. Let's have more creative to support this product. So I think I measure my success as happened in the past and then trying to kind of spin it and make it better and like go above and beyond the status quo. And if I know that like I just did 2 things different this year versus last year and like innovated something, that makes me happy. And then I would say the other part of professional success for me is like really, and it's so simple, but learning to create boundaries. So where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna shut off my computer at 8, even if it's crazy busy, so that I can do yoga. And I think that like, I remember one of my managers once messaged me and she's like, you're working until super late. Like you're going to burn out. I want you to rest too. And so I think like so many Barnard women I know are so career focused and put in all the time into what they love. But I think for me, a lot of success has been learning to just be like, all right, I love my job, but I am like a whole person outside of it. So how do I make myself happy outside of work? And one thing I started doing was volunteering in Queens as an English teacher. And I only did it on Saturdays for 2 hours, but it actually refueled me so much so that then I could come into work on Monday and be like, okay, I'm ready, I have energy. So I think I've definitely found a lot of success in redefining what matters to me and the hours I'm giving into different pockets of life.
Great, thanks.
I was just going to say, I think those are both Jess and Giselle had excellent examples, and I agree with everything they said. I'll just add one thing. I think that this kind of goes back to what I was saying before. If you have the foundation of a good education, you're able to then pursue things that you love and make it a career. So to me, success is something that I look up to my mom for this, actually, waking up every day and being excited about the work that you do, going to your job and being just full of energy to face whatever challenges may come, but also enjoying the work that you do and giving back to your community, like Giselle's talking about, like I spoke about earlier with the Sotomayor program. Giving back to your community may also be an outlet to increase your happiness. And to me, increasing your happiness with good, productive work you're doing is success. And I'm just going to share one quick website. I won't say the whole. It's a website where Oprah Winfrey talks about her definition of success. And it's a very short article that was written on March 1st, 2017. It's called The Art of Success. And so I'm sharing that link with everybody so you can look into somebody who I think is the epitome of success as a woman of color, as a Black woman who at this time, you know, I never grew up watching Oprah Winfrey's, her show, I forget the word, but basically her daily show. I never grew up watching that because I wasn't allowed to watch TV during the weekdays growing up. It was only weekdays, homework, reading, that's it. Weekends you get to watch TV. But as a woman of color, I reflect upon the intelligence and the wisdom that other successful women of color have shared with everyone, shared with the world. And I think this is a helpful link for people if you want to see Oprah Winfrey's thoughts on success. And I think one quote that I love by her, I'll just say this one last thing, a little bit of a tangent. It's more about luck. So I think about this quote a lot as an adult. Luck, this is what Oprah Winfrey says, luck is preparation meeting opportunity. If you hadn't been prepared when the opportunity came along, you wouldn't have been lucky. So I think being successful, some people say, oh, someone's so lucky to be successful and to love their job, to love their work. But if you're not prepared, when the opportunity comes, you won't be able to find that lucky moment, that thing that makes you excited to wake up every day. So just those two things I wanted to share. And I shared the link in the chat for anybody who'd like to look at it after.
Awesome, thanks. I love the way all of your definitions of professional success touched on a lot of your personal attributes and kind of seeing yourselves as whole people and not just worker machines, which is great to hear. So can you kind of expanding on that a little bit, how do your visible and invisible identities factor into the way that you measure success for yourself? Because all of you are in industries where there may not be a lot of people who look like you or value your experiences. And so kind of if anyone feels comfortable sharing the ways that they've navigated that and how that factored into this holistic view of success. So whoever wants to shout, just unmute yourselves.
I can start first if you'd like. I know I let Jess and Giselle kind of start the, kick off. So the question is how the definition of yourself has informed visible and invisible identity factor into the way you've measured success for yourself. Okay, so I think for me, it's quite simple. In my work as a family law attorney and in all the work that I do as an attorney, my goal is to try to give back to communities that are underserved, and also to try to promote fairness and justice to communities that have traditionally been oppressed and traditionally been silenced. So how does that work in a professional environment? As a family law attorney, when you have a client before you and they're telling you their life story of abuse, you think about ways that you can help them. My job is to help them get not only divorced, but also if they need it in order of protection. And I'm also training in trials on how those clients can protect their rights to have custody and visitation of their children, or full custody, and to protect the visitation that is given to the, let's say, abusive partner. So I come to that work with a lot of compassion and listening. I try to listen. That's something that I really struggle with. And my identity so I actually have an invisible disability. I have a ADHD, and that makes it really difficult to concentrate and to focus sometimes. So listening to my clients and trying to absorb all the facts they're telling me sometimes can be very difficult. So I try to challenge myself by doing a good job of taking notes as they're speaking. And that not only allows me to hone the skill of being attentive and paying attention to the story, but also comes through as professionalism because I'm taking detailed notes so that I could use those detailed notes to then write a motion on their behalf, or to then quickly put together divorce papers so that I'm able to file the divorce and get everything done all in one shot without any mistakes, because I'm detail oriented and I try to take those notes to keep focused. So that's just a small example of how my personality, this thing I'm working with, a challenge actually, it's a challenge, something that I struggle with to focus. I then turn it around and make it an advantage by using my detailed notes and to focus to be able to then do excellent work for my clients. And I mentioned before, being a woman of color from the Bronx And also I lived in every single borough except for Staten Island. So getting to meet different communities and getting to be immersed in those different communities has been really wonderful. And it's allowed me to understand the different needs and the different cultures that are in different communities. Just name a few places: Manhattan for Barnard. Afterwards, I lived on the Upper East Side. Queens for law school. I lived in Astoria. My law school was in Long Island City. That was for 3 years. After clerking in New Jersey for a year, I then returned to New York and went back to my roots in the Bronx. And now I'm living in Brooklyn. I've been living in Brooklyn for almost 4 years now. And so, yeah, I think being able to pay attention to the needs around you, the people that you're among. And then in terms of the Sotomayor program, I guess the identity that I had is being a student who was fortunate. I was able to have a father who was an attorney who talked to me about what it was like to litigate in court and to talk to me about fairness and justice. And being raised with those values, then trying to share those values with high school students who may not have that opportunity to get to learn from legal professionals. And so my background, knowing the value of having a father who's a professional and who's an attorney, and being able to use that to bring to other students from New York City, the 5 boroughs, through the Sotomayor Internship program, and giving them the opportunity specifically of interning with a judge for the summer and being connected to a mentor. That's my identity that connects to the Sotomayor program.
Great, thanks, Selena. Jess or Giselle, you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, just given what's going on in the world. I think for me, so I identify as a Black woman. I am of mixed race, but I self-identify as Black. And I think when I first started my career, and I'm sure a lot of you have either experienced this or heard this, I sort of had the notion that anything I do right or wrong is like a reflection of the broader community. And I've tried really, really, really hard to move out of that way of thinking, because I don't think it's fair to myself. I don't think it's fair to other people. And so the way I've sort of dealt with that is, instead of having the idea that, okay, I make a mistake and now everyone's going to anticipate every Black woman that comes in here is going to make the same mistake, I spend a lot of time mentoring people who come in behind me. I do a lot of reverse mentoring, and I just sort of channel it into like helping people define their own success or work through their own situations. And so I'm taking what I've learned and teaching others how to deal with, the good things, the bad things, rather than thinking that everything I do is going to be reflection. And so that's sort of a way that I've channeled what I think is kind of like a very natural but unproductive way of thinking into a way of how can I take what I've learned and my successes to help other people. So that's, I think, one main thing. And then I wouldn't necessarily call this part of my identity, but I've definitely had like mental health struggles. Like I've struggled with anxiety and depression through the years. And so I think that I've sort of thought about how that's affected my work, affected me as a professional. And I'm lucky enough to work in a place, I don't know how familiar people are with Bridgewater, but the culture is like pretty radical and pretty different than a lot of other environments. And so there's a lot of emphasis on transparency and truth and like deeply understanding the whole person. And so I think Bridgewater's been a really interesting journey for me, where I've actually been relatively transparent about my struggles with mental health. And I'm not saying I would be, I don't want to say I'd be lying, but like there are definitely places where that is not yet possible. And so I'm not going to tell you to go and share this with your employer more broadly. But for me, it's been like a very interesting journey of having really great discussions with people and being honest when I'm having a hard time. And again, I feel lucky right now, but I also know that if I ever chose to leave Bridgewater and go somewhere else, it's not something I'd be immediately able to do, I don't think. But that's just to say that, like, at least where you work, find someone you can trust, whether it's on your team or not on your team, and be able to speak openly about these things. Because I think that if I'm not my best, I can't be the most successful. And so I've spent the past couple of years at Bridgewater in particular thinking about, and I think this has been a theme through what I'm saying, but like my whole person and being honest about everything. And so I think those are two parts of my identity. And again, I try not to let the mental health define who I am, but it is definitely a part of who I am. Has factored into like how I think about success. And you can be successful and still have struggles and still have hard times and have days where you're not your best. And I think it took me a really long time to realize that, because growing up as a Black woman, my mom was like, doing well is not good. Like, it's not, you have to do better than well to be seen equally as people who don't look like you. And so, and that's a lot of pressure, right? That's a lot of pressure. And so while I do still think that there are parts of that statement that's true, I've been able to still be able to figure out a way to like be myself and admit that I have faults and admit that I have bad days and make mistakes. And it's been really like liberating. So I encourage you, you know, if that happens for you at work or anything like that, like try to find ways where you can have outlets and have someone that truly does know the whole you, because it can be exhausting to be in a space and not feel like you can bring your entire self. And so, so it's also something to consider when you're thinking about a place that you want to work or a career you want to have. Again, first jobs a lot of the time are like, I'm going to try this thing out, or I need a job after college. But as you think about what you really want, like reflect deeply about the kind of space and the people that you want to work with, because sometimes it's more important than the literal thing that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I think we all, as I'm also a Black woman, get that work twice as hard to get half as far conversation, get that talk. And so thanks for touching on that, because you're speaking my language too. Giselle, want to share your thoughts on this part?
Yeah, definitely. So I am a queer Latina woman, and I remember when I, was dating my partner when I started working at Lauder about 3 years ago. I didn't tell anyone on my team that I had a girlfriend. I was really afraid, honestly, just because it was a lot of girls talking about The Bachelor, and I just didn't feel like I related to them. And I think that's a big thing that I've learned in my career thus far. I mean, just 3 years of being at Lauder, is like that it's okay to take your time to discern and decide who you want to trust with different parts of your identity. My last name is Espinosa, so I think most people know that I'm a Latina woman, so I don't feel like I need to sometimes I don't want to go into the complexities of that or the background until I feel comfortable with people. I think that that's fair and it's okay. And I think the way that I first build relationships with people, I just want it to be like a work foundation. So I want to feel like I'm being respected for my work. So when I first show up in a room, I just, much like Jess was saying, I try to be twice as prepared as everyone else, to have notes, to send the recap, to always volunteer to be the yes girl. And then once I feel like I've built a relationship with someone that's based on trust and mutual respect, then I feel like I can, start opening up and talk about whether.
You went on mute.
Oh, sorry guys. For example, even with COVID-19, when my mom has been a nanny my whole life, my dad has been a waiter my whole life. So when they both lost their jobs, it was something where I just told my manager, I always work during my lunch block, but this week I can't because I need to help my family. And I just thought that that was the boundary that I had set, where I didn't need to go above and beyond explicating that. And she was really respectful because she trusted me enough to know that I would get the work done. So I think building the relationships where people know your rep and they know what you bring to the table does allow a little bit more flexibility when you have, parts of your identity that like arise that need help or attention, like your family or whatever. But to be fully transparent, I think it's really hard. And I think every day it's a little bit different. And I think to Jess's point about your team and the culture, you kind of have to read it and see, are these the kind of people who want to know that I had anxiety last night and like couldn't sleep at all? Or is it better if I just get the work done, hop offline and take care of myself and hit refresh? I can come back stronger the next day. So I would say, like, I wish I could be more positive about it, but I think it really is just reading the room and seeing what feels good for you. And I tried to just do that in every meeting, every call, with every relationship at work. And I think I'll end with the fact that, like, finding people who are like you and who share similarities. Like my mentor, Chidima. She's Nigerian American. She actually grew up in Chicago. And so I knew like I couldn't talk to everyone on a big call about life and what was happening, or like Andres Guardado, but I could talk to Chidima about it, you know? I could have a one-on-one. So I think just finding your person is also so key, because sometimes it's not the whole team, but it's just one person that inspires you to keep being yourself, even though you're the only one who looks like you or has your history in a space.
Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for all of you for being real and being honest. Never apologize for being honest, because that's really the purpose of these panels, and every time we talk to students and alums, is to make sure that everyone knows the real deal about what's going on. And so definitely appreciate all of you for that. Everyone on the call, if there are any questions that you may have for the panelists, you want to put them in the chat or unmute yourselves and just shout them out, or you want to think about it. It has one last, I guess, scripted question in this next few minutes while folks queue up. And you all gave this already, but if there's any other piece of advice that you would give folks who are beginning to define this professional success for themselves, yeah, like what would have helped you maybe define it, or or things that have been helping you kind of in this moment of multiple pandemics, and also just generally as a professional. So whoever wants to shout out, and then everyone else on the call, either put your questions in the chat or just wait for a pause and jump on in.
Yeah, I'm happy to quickly share. I think that, so I think I've emphasized a lot. It's like figuring out who you want to be as a human. Like, I think that's one half of what success should be to you. And then the thing that I've learned in the first like 5 or so years of my career is finding someone ideally who looks like you, but unfortunately in some spaces you probably won't be able to, who has been successful, right? And talking to them about what has helped them get there, how did they figure it out? And then and I think I shared this on the panel I was on a few months ago, it's like identifying people who can be mentors and then people who can be sponsors, and understanding the difference between those two things is really, really important. So a mentor is someone who is going to like give you advice, tell you what to do, help you through certain situations. And a sponsor is someone who can pound the table for you and influence decisions that have to do with you. And it's really important to have both of those things. And ideally, in an ideal world, you know, your mentor, possibly someone that looks like you, but a lot of times, unfortunately, your sponsor won't be. And so how do you develop trust with that person? And so I think it's taking the combination of, okay, this is who I want to be as a person. These are my values. These are the things that are important to me. Marrying it with, okay, at XYZ company or an XYZ space or at XYZ school, this is what it means to be successful. And how can you marry those two things? Understanding that you'll probably have to flex in certain directions. Either there's something that's super important to you that maybe, you know, you'll still be able to prioritize, but won't be the main thing. Or there's, you know, something that defines success at your company that you just don't agree with. And are you willing to make that trade-off, et cetera? But I think it's not losing sight. Don't lose sight of who you want to be in order to define, like fit into the definition of success at your organization, but also make sure you're at least understanding what it means to be successful at your organization, and then making trade-offs based on what you know. So that sort of would be my advice. I'm trying to think. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Jess. Selena?
Yeah, I'll share one more thing. I think that was an excellent point to reiterate, because sometimes you don't know what success looks like for you. You have all these values, and sometimes it's hard to figure out what career matches up with those values. So people who you admire, who you look at and say, wow, I'd love to be like that one day. I think being able to understand their paths, how they got to where they are, and learning from their failures, or even having your own missteps and learning experiences and failures. I don't like the word failure, because I feel like it's a learning opportunity. That's how I like to think of it. So I'm going to say learning opportunity. That learning opportunity, you're able to then have your North Star of whether it's a person or a team of mentors, your North Star to figure out how to use that learning opportunity, the skills that you learn from that, to the next step. And so I just wanted to add that. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention. There was a question, we didn't touch on it too much, but the idea about success shifting due to the move to online work, if so, how? I just wanted to be transparent and say, I don't think my definition of success has changed at all. The only thing that has changed is prioritizing meditation and mental health, like Jess and Giselle were talking about. And so the basic idea of what success means to me stays the same as what I said before at the very beginning of our call, which is talking about following what your passions are and being able to find a career based on those passions. And for those who just joined the chat late, I sent a link earlier in the call with Oprah Winfrey's really interesting article on how she defines success.
Thanks. Giselle, want to close out?
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, I went to a Barnard panel when I was at school there, and I remember someone said, actually it was Nelly Galan, she's this real estate mogul, Latino, really cool. And she was like, you know, you don't have to know your mentor in real life. Like there can be people whose paths you study and who you read about, who interviews you watch, and those are your mentors in a way that they're helping you shape your own path. So I really love that piece of advice, and I wanted to share it with you guys. If there are people that you idolize and admire and like their path, they can be almost like a mentor to you, even if you've never met them. And I love that. I love, like, you know, hearing of a really fabulous woman of color who is like a writer and has worked at this industry and learning how she transitioned from one role to the other, and just being like, wow, like if she did it and this is how she did it, that gives me ideas for how I'll be able to also, you know, flourish in life.
Well, thanks to all of our panelists. Are there any questions from our recent alums or recent grads or anyone on this call?
Hi, I just had a quick question specifically for Jess. I heard you speak about after graduation taking a little bit of time off. I don't know if I heard correctly. If anybody who, well, for everybody on the call, but specifically Jess, like how did your time off after graduation sort of play into your idea of success, seeing that other people, like I know Giselle was talking about getting a job before graduation and different things like that. So how did that play into everything?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll set the context because I think it might change or at least put my answer into perspective. So I had an internship the summer before my last semester, and I had a full-time job at the end of that internship. So you know, I think that there's the situation where you're taking time off after school and trying to figure out what the next opportunity will be. And I think for me, it was more of like let me take 3 months and just breathe. And so, but again, I can tell you, I think it gave me a lot more, it gave me space and time to start thinking about who I was and what was important to me. So I think my time was spent a little selfishly in a good way, thinking about myself and what I want, and less like, oh my gosh, what's my job going to be? Or, oh my gosh, what's the next opportunity going to be? And then I just did something fun. I worked at SoulCycle for 3 months at the front desk, and it was a blast. I had a great time. I'd never worked in like retail or customer service or anything like that before. And so it was a lot of fun. I just did something that I knew I probably would never do again in my life. And it was great. And so, you know, and again, I acknowledge the privilege I had to be able to do something like that. So I understand that not everybody is in the position to be able to do that. I was lucky enough to be able to live at home and, you know, not have a full salary for a few months. And again, totally acknowledge the privilege that comes along with that. But to the extent that you do have some time to think, and I think the time of COVID, unfortunately, whether you're choosing to take time or it's just hard to find a job right now, I would try to channel really like reflecting deeply about the things that you want, to the extent that you have the privilege and the opportunity to be able to do something like that. And then if you don't, which I understand a lot of people are in the position where they don't, still try to carve out some time during the day, an hour, 2 hours, to try your hardest to be able to get out of your head of what's going on, and I need to find a job and I need to have an income, and still spend that hour or two reflecting, because I think it'll actually maybe help you get there faster. But I know compartmentalizing is extremely hard, and I give advice that I probably myself wouldn't be able to take, but just try to spend some time doing that. But yeah, I took some time to just have some fun. Yeah.
So I know a few panelists have a hard stop at 2. And so is there any last questions or anything? Panelists, are the students on this call able to reach out via LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. And then we have in Handshake, since they've all been on panels before, all of their bios from our Career Insight series are available as well. And so that has more info and also their LinkedIn profile. So thank you all so much for being in the audience and for sharing your experiences. I feel like I will be watching this recording as like a pick-me-up too, because you all gave such great advice and you all just shared so much about yourselves, and I appreciate it. And I know from the chat and from all of these applause that others appreciate it too. So thank you all so much. And yeah, look for this recording. You'll get an email when it's up, and then panelists, I can share it with you as well. Okay.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.